She stirred the soup slowly, watching the powder dissolve. Her hands didn't shake. Her heart didn't race. Because, in her mind, she had already convinced herself, this wasn't murder. This was justice. If that caught your attention, please hit that subscribe button right now because this story will shake you to your core. Let's get into it. In a village nestled between two rivers, there lived a man named Chief Okonkwo. Now, this wasn't just any man. Chief Okonkwo was what you would call a big man, wealthy, influential, the kind of person whose opinion carried weight in every village meeting. He owned vast lands that stretched as far as the eye could see. He traded in palm oil and yams with neighboring towns, and his compound was one of the largest in the entire region. But wealth and respect weren't the only things Chief Okonkwo had. He had two wives. And this is where our story truly begins. His first wife was named Adanna. Now, Adanna wasn't just the first wife. She was the foundation wife, the one who had been there from the very beginning. 20 years ago, when Chief Okonkwo was nothing but a struggling young man with big dreams and empty pockets, Adanna was the woman who stood by him. She worked beside him in the farms, helped him sell his first harvest, encouraged him when failure seemed certain, and prayed for him when the road got tough. Together, they built everything from scratch. And as the years passed and the blessings came, Adanna gave him what every man in their culture valued most: sons. 3 strong, healthy boys. Chike, the firstborn, was intelligent and responsible, already learning the family business at 17. Obinna, the second son, was brave and fearless, the kind of child who made his father's chest swell with pride. And Emeka, the last-born at 13, was the gentle one, the one who still held his mother's hand and made her laugh. For years, their home was peaceful. Adanna ran the compound with efficiency and wisdom. She knew when to speak and when to be silent. She knew how to manage the household, how to command respect from the servants, and how to support her husband in public. She wasn't just a wife. She was a partner, a co-builder of the empire they now enjoyed. But then, 5 years ago, everything changed. Chief Okonkwo came home one evening and called Adanna to the parlor. She could tell from his face that something significant was about to happen. He cleared his throat, looked away, and said the words that would shatter her world. "Adanna, I have decided to marry another wife." The room went silent. Adanna felt like the ground had opened beneath her feet. "Another wife?" she whispered. "But why? Have I not been a good wife to you? Have I not given you children? Have I not stood by you through everything?" Chief Okonkwo shook his head. "This is not about you being inadequate. You have been a wonderful wife. But I want a daughter, Adanna. I want a little girl who'll call me Papa, who I can spoil with wrappers and jewelry. Our sons are my pride, yes, but I want to experience the joy of raising a daughter before I grow too old." Adanna wanted to scream. She wanted to ask why her 3 sons weren't enough. She wanted to remind him of all the sacrifices she had made. But she knew the culture she lived in. She knew that as a wife, she had no power to stop him. So she swallowed her pain, nodded slowly, and said, "If that is your wish, my husband." 2 months later, Chief Okonkwo brought home Nkiru. Nkiru was everything Adanna used to be 20 years ago. Young, beautiful, full of energy and life. She had smooth skin, bright eyes, and a laugh that filled the compound. She was 25 years old, the same age Adanna had been when she married the chief. And from the moment Nkiru stepped into that compound, Adanna felt herself becoming invisible. At first, Adanna tried to be the bigger person. She welcomed Nkiru with open arms, showed her around the compound, taught her how Chief Okonkwo liked his food prepared, explained the household routines, and even gave her advice on how to make the marriage work. She told herself, "I am the senior wife. I must show maturity and wisdom." But Nkiru didn't just settle into the compound. She took it over. Within weeks, she had rearranged the parlor furniture, changed the menu, hired new servants who reported directly to her, and begun making decisions that only the senior wife should make. And Chief Okonkwo? He said nothing. He simply watched his new wife with adoring eyes and let her do whatever she pleased. 6 months after the marriage, Nkiru missed her monthly cycle. She was pregnant. The chief was overjoyed, but Adanna felt a knot tighten in her stomach. What if it's another son? She prayed quietly. Let it be a son. Then he will see that I was enough all along. But 9 months later, when Nkiru went into labor and the midwives brought out the baby, their announcement echoed through the compound. It's a girl. The chief has a daughter. Chief Okonkwo went mad with joy. He ran into the street, shouting the news to anyone who would listen. He distributed money to the villagers, bought drinks for the men, and declared that a grand naming ceremony would be held. For 7 days, people feasted and celebrated as if a king had been born. The baby was named Chidera, what God has written. And from the moment that child came into the world, Chief Okonkwo changed completely. He would wake up early just to watch Chidera sleep. He would cancel important business meetings because the baby smiled at him. He bought her the finest baby clothes from the city, toys that no other child in the village had, and jewelry that most grown women would envy. Every evening, he would sit with Chidera in his arms for hours, singing to her, talking to her, completely absorbed in her tiny world. But it wasn't just about the baby. It was about Nkiru too. Overnight, she became the most important person in the compound. Chief Okonkwo moved her into the master bedroom, the room that used to belong to him and Adanna. He bought her gold jewelry, expensive wrappers, and perfumes from the city. He took her to social gatherings and introduced her as if she were his only wife. When village elders visited, it was Nkiru who served them kola nut, Nkiru who sat beside the chief, Nkiru who spoke with confidence while Adanna watched from the corner. Adanna became a ghost in her own home. Her sons noticed it too. Mama, why does Papa no longer eat with us? Chike asked one evening. Adanna had no answer. The truth was too painful to speak. Their father had found a new family and forgotten the old one. The village women were ruthless with their gossip. At the market, they would gather in groups and whisper loud enough for Adanna to hear. You see the senior wife? She's like a housemaid now. The new wife has taken over everything. Some would shake their heads in pity. Others would laugh behind their hands. One woman even said, that's what she gets for not giving him a daughter. A woman who doesn't give her husband what he wants will always be replaced. Each comment was like acid on an open wound. Adanna would return home from the market with tears streaming down her face, her basket of goods forgotten. She stopped attending social gatherings because she couldn't bear the pity in people's eyes. She stopped going to church because she was tired of people asking, Sister Adanna, how are you coping with the new wife? The jealousy began as a small seed. It would whisper to her late at night when she heard laughter coming from Nkiru's room. It would grow a little more every morning when she saw the chief playing with Chidera. It fed on every gift Nkiru received, every smile the chief gave that little girl, every moment Adanna felt forgotten and replaced. 1 year passed. Then 2. Chidera grew into a beautiful toddler with chubby cheeks and bright, intelligent eyes. She was the kind of child who made everyone smile, sweet, playful, and absolutely adored by her father. The chief would carry her everywhere, showing her off like a trophy. This is my Chidera, he would say proudly. My princess, my joy. But every time Adanna heard those words, something inside her twisted with pain. What about my sons? She would ask herself. I gave him 3 princes, and he calls this baby girl his joy. Her sons were growing up, becoming men, but their father barely noticed. Chike scored the highest marks in his apprenticeship, but the chief simply nodded and turned back to playing with Chidera. Obinna won a wrestling competition in the neighboring village, but the chief was too busy shopping for Chidera's birthday to attend. Emeka begged his father to teach him how to trade, but the chief said, Not now, I'm busy, and went to take Chidera for a walk. The boys felt the rejection too. They became quiet and withdrawn, spending more time away from home, avoiding the compound where they were no longer valued. And watching her sons suffer this rejection made Adanna's jealousy turn into something darker, hatred. She began to hate Chidera. Not just the normal resentment of a co-wife situation, but deep, consuming hatred. She couldn't look at the child without her chest tightening with rage. She couldn't hear Chidera's laughter without wanting to scream. At night, she would lie awake imagining what life would be like if that child didn't exist. If somehow, some way, Chidera disappeared and things went back to normal. These thoughts terrified her at first. What kind of woman thinks such things about an innocent child? She would ask herself. But the thoughts kept coming, growing stronger and more vivid until they didn't terrify her anymore. Until they felt reasonable, justified even. That child stole my life, she would tell herself. That child ruined my marriage, humiliated me before the entire village, and took my husband's love from my sons. That child is the problem. If she wasn't here, everything would go back to the way it was. The breaking point came on Chidera's second birthday. Chief Okonkwo threw a celebration that the entire region attended. He rented a live band, hired dancers, bought a massive cake from the city, and invited every important person in the surrounding villages. He placed Nkiru on a throne beside him like a queen, and together they watched Chidera, dressed in a tiny golden gown, dance to the music. Adanna was given the task of serving guests, not as the senior wife, but as help. She walked around with trays of drinks, smiling through clenched teeth, while people asked her, "How does it feel to see the chief so happy?" The humiliation was complete. That night, as she lay in her bed listening to the distant sounds of continued celebration, Adanna made her decision. She couldn't live like this anymore. Something had to change. And since she couldn't make the chief love her again, she would remove the obstacle in her path. The next market day, Adanna told everyone she was visiting her sick mother in a distant village. Instead, she traveled 3 towns away to a place called Amaguns, where people whispered about a powerful native doctor who could solve any problem, no matter how dark. She found a shrine hidden deep in the forest, marked only by red and white cloths tied to trees. The place smelled of incense and something else, something ancient and dangerous. An old man emerged from the shadows, his eyes cloudy with age, but somehow seeing everything. "I know why you're here," he said before Adanna could speak. "You want to remove someone from your life." Adanna was startled. "How did you?" "I can see the jealousy dripping from your spirit like blood," he interrupted. "It has consumed you entirely. But know this, woman. What you plan to do will destroy you too." "I don't care," Adanna said, her voice steady. "I just want my life back." The old man studied her for a long moment, then disappeared into his shrine. When he returned, he held a small bottle no bigger than a thumb. Inside was a fine black powder that seemed to absorb light. "This is not ordinary poison," he said slowly. "Mix a pinch of this in food or drink, and the person will fall sick. It will look like a natural illness, fever, convulsions, weakness. No herbalist will be able to cure it because this is not a sickness of the body. It is a sickness of the spirit." He handed her the bottle, and Adanna's fingers trembled as she took it. This was real now. There was no going back. "But hear me clearly," the old man continued, his voice dropping to a whisper. "When you take a life with this poison, especially the life of an innocent child, the blood will cry out from the ground. The spirits will demand payment. This curse will follow you and your bloodline. Your children will pay for what their mother has done." Adanna barely heard the warning. Her mind was already planning. "How much?" she asked. The native doctor told her the price, and she paid, without hesitation. She tucked the bottle deep into her wrapper and left that shrine feeling lighter than she had in years. She told herself she wasn't doing anything wrong. She was simply restoring balance, taking back what was rightfully hers. 2 weeks later, the opportunity came. There was a village festival celebrating the harvest, and the entire compound was busy with preparations. Nkiru spent the whole morning cooking a special pot of oha soup with stockfish, Chidera's favorite. The little girl had been running around the compound all morning, playing and laughing, asking every few minutes, "Is the soup ready, Mama?" Adanna watched from her kitchen window as Nkiru dished the soup into 3 bowls, one for the chief, one for herself, and one for Chidera. The chief would eat later after returning from a meeting, but Nkiru and Chidera would eat together now. "Let me help you carry the food," Adanna offered, appearing suddenly with a smile. Nkiru looked surprised but pleased. Thank you, sister. That's very kind of you. We are family, Adanna said sweetly. Let me take Chidera's bowl for you. You carry yours and the chief's. My kitchen is closer to the dining area. Nkiru handed over the small bowl meant for Chidera, without suspicion. Why would she suspect anything? Despite everything, she had never seen Adanna as a threat. She saw her as the older, wiser wife who had accepted her presence. Adanna walked slowly to her kitchen, her heart pounding but her hands steady. She set the bowl on her table, pulled out the tiny bottle from where she'd hidden it in her wrapper, and opened it. The black powder inside seemed to pulse with dark energy. Just a pinch, the native doctor had said. Just a pinch. She tilted the bottle over Chidera's soup. For one brief second, her hand froze. She thought about the child's innocent face, the way Chidera sometimes called her Mama Ada in her sweet toddler voice, how the little girl had once given her a flower she'd picked from the garden. But then she remembered. She remembered the humiliation at the birthday party. She remembered her husband's indifference to their sons. She remembered lying awake night after night, invisible and unwanted in her own home. She remembered the village women's mocking whispers. The powder fell into the soup. Adanna stirred it with a spoon until it dissolved completely, leaving no trace. Then she carried the bowl to the dining area where Nkiru and Chidera were already seated and waiting. Here you go, my dear, Adanna said, placing the bowl in front of Chidera. The little girl's face lit up with joy. Thank you, Mama Ada, Chidera said, picking up her spoon eagerly. Adanna watched, her face calm, her smile gentle, as Chidera took the first spoonful. Then the second. Then the third. The child ate with the pure enjoyment of an innocent soul, completely unaware that she was consuming death itself. This soup is so sweet, Mama, Chidera declared, and Nkiru laughed with pride. Adanna excused herself and returned to her room. She lay on her bed and waited. In her twisted mind, she felt no guilt, only a strange sense of relief, as if a heavy burden had been lifted from her shoulders. She actually fell asleep, something she hadn't been able to do peacefully in months. She was awakened by screaming. It was Nkiru's voice, high-pitched and panicked, calling for the chief. Adanna jumped from her bed and ran outside along with several servants. In the parlor, she found Chidera convulsing violently in her mother's arms. The child's eyes had rolled back, her small body was burning with fever so intense you could feel the heat from where you stood, and foam was coming from her mouth. What happened? Adanna asked, her voice full of perfectly performed concern. I don't know. Nkiru sobbed. She was fine, and then suddenly she started shaking. Someone get help, please. Chief Okonkwo burst into the compound, having been summoned from his meeting. When he saw his daughter in that state, he let out a sound that wasn't quite human, a mixture of fear and anguish that made everyone who heard it feel cold inside. He scooped Chidera from Nkiru's arms and ran. He ran to the village's most famous herbalist, a man who had cured everything from snake bites to mysterious fevers. The herbalist examined the child, gave her herbs to drink, rubbed ointments on her body, and said prayers. But Chidera only got worse. They took her to another herbalist in the next village. Same result. Then another. And another. Chief Okonkwo spent a fortune in one night, going from one healer to the next, but nobody could tell him what was wrong with his daughter. They all said the same thing. This is not a sickness we recognize. This is something else. By midnight, Chidera's convulsions had reduced, but her fever remained dangerously high. Her small body had grown weak from the constant seizures. She couldn't eat, could barely drink water, and worst of all, she cried continuously, a weak, pitiful cry that broke everyone's heart. For 3 days and 3 nights, the entire compound stayed awake. Nkiru refused to eat or sleep, holding her daughter and begging the gods to take her life instead. Chief Okonkwo aged 10 years in those 3 days, his face becoming gaunt and hollow. Prayer warriors came and prayed. The village elders came and performed rituals. Nothing worked. Adanna played her role perfectly. She cried with the others, brought food that nobody ate, suggested herbalists she knew about, and stayed by Nkiru's side like a supportive sister. Nobody suspected her.
How could they?
She had nothing to gain from the child's death. Or so they thought. On the morning of the fourth day, just as the sun was rising, Chidera took her last breath. She died in her father's arms, her tiny hand clutching his finger, her eyes finally closing in peace after days of agony. The wail that came from Chief Okonkwo shook the entire compound. It was the sound of a man whose soul had been ripped apart. Nkiru collapsed beside him, her grief so intense that she stopped making sounds. She just opened her mouth in a silent scream, tears streaming down her face like rivers. The entire village came to mourn. They had never seen such a tragedy. A healthy, happy child suddenly struck down by a mysterious illness. The funeral was the saddest thing the village had ever witnessed. As they lowered Chidera's tiny coffin into the ground, grown men wept openly, and women threw themselves on the ground in sympathy for the parents. Adanna stood at the graveside, tears on her face, her hand over her heart in a gesture of sorrow. Inside, she felt empty.
Not happy.
Not sad. Just empty. The monster inside her had fed, and now it was quiet. In the weeks after Chidera's death, the compound became a house of ghosts. Nkiru stopped speaking entirely. She would sit by her daughter's grave from sunrise to sunset, staring at the ground as if she could will the child back to life. She stopped eating, stopped bathing, stopped living in any real sense. Her body was present, but her spirit had gone to follow her daughter. Chief Okonkwo tried to comfort her, but she pushed him away. "Your love killed my daughter," she told him once, her voice hoarse from weeks of silence. "If you hadn't shown her so much attention, if you hadn't made her the center of everything, nobody would have been jealous enough to hurt her." The chief didn't understand what she meant. Jealous? Who would be jealous of a child? But Nkiru didn't explain. She just returned to her silence, to her graveside vigil, to her slow death by grief. 3 months passed. The compound was still mourning, still trying to return to some form of normalcy. Adanna noticed that her husband had started paying more attention to his sons, as if Chidera's death had reminded him he had other children. This should have made her happy, but instead, she felt nothing. The emptiness had grown larger, consuming any satisfaction the revenge should have brought. Then, one morning, Chike didn't wake up for breakfast. Adanna went to his room and found him sweating profusely, his body trembling. "Mama, I don't feel well," he said weakly. It started as a fever. Just a simple fever. Adanna gave him herbs, the same ones she'd used for years whenever her boys were sick. But by evening, Chike was worse. By midnight, he was convulsing. By dawn, he was crying in pain, saying his body felt like it was on fire from the inside. Adanna's heart began to race with a fear she couldn't name. This looked familiar. Too familiar. Chief Okonkwo called the same herbalists who had tried to save Chidera. They came, examined Chike, and their faces grew dark with confusion. "This is the same sickness that killed the chief's daughter," one of them whispered. "But how? What kind of disease attacks like this?" They tried everything. Different herbs, different prayers, different rituals. Nothing worked. Chike suffered for 5 days, 5 days of agony that mirrored Chidera's suffering exactly. And then, just like Chidera, he died. Adanna's world collapsed. This was her first son, her intelligent, responsible boy who was supposed to carry the family name. As they buried him, she couldn't even cry. She was in shock, her mind unable to process what was happening. "It's a curse," the village elders declared. "Something evil is in this compound." But before they could investigate further, Okonkwo fell ill. Same symptoms. Same progression. Same inevitable outcome. Within a week of Chike's death, Okonkwo was also gone. The village was in chaos. 2 sons dead within weeks of each other, both from the same mysterious illness that had killed Chidera. People started avoiding the compound, afraid that whatever curse was there might spread to them. The few who visited spoke in hushed tones about angry spirits and blood guilt. Adanna was drowning in grief, but somewhere in the depths of her pain, a terrible understanding was beginning to dawn. The native doctor's words came back to her. "The blood will cry out from the ground." The spirits will demand payment. Your children will pay for what their mother has done.
No.
No, this couldn't be related. This had to be a coincidence. A terrible, horrible coincidence. But then Emeka, her baby, her last remaining child, fell ill. When Adanna saw the first signs, the fever, the sweating, the trembling, she knew. She knew with absolute certainty what was happening. This wasn't sickness. This was payment. This was the curse manifesting exactly as the native doctor had warned. She ran to Emeka's bedside and fell on her knees beside him. Her 13-year-old son looked at her with frightened eyes. "Mama, am I going to die like my brothers?" Something broke inside Adanna. Looking at her last child, seeing the same death sentence on him that had taken his brothers, she finally understood the full horror of what she had done. She had killed an innocent child out of jealousy, and now her own innocent children were paying the price. The native doctor was right. The blood had cried out from the ground, and the spirits were demanding justice. That evening, as Emeka's condition worsened despite every treatment, Adanna stumbled out of his room and into the compound's courtyard where Chief Okonkwo, Nkiru, and several village elders were gathered, discussing what evil could have befallen the family. "It was me," Adanna said. Everyone turned to look at her. She stood there, tears finally flowing, her body shaking. "It was me," she repeated, louder this time. "I killed Chidera." The silence that followed was deafening.
What?
Chief Okonkwo whispered. And then it all came pouring out. Adanna confessed everything: the jealousy that had consumed her, the visit to the native doctor, the poison in the soup, the moment she watched Chidera eat the food that would kill her. She held nothing back. Every terrible detail, every evil thought, every moment of her crime was laid bare before everyone. "I was jealous," she sobbed. "I was so jealous that I couldn't think straight. I watched my husband forget about me and my sons. I saw how that child took everything from us, and I wanted her gone. I wanted my life back. So, I poisoned her. I killed an innocent child because of my jealousy, and now my own children are dying because of what I did. The native doctor warned me. He said the curse would follow my bloodline. He said my children would pay. And now they're all dying one by one, and I can't stop it." Chief Okonkwo stared at her as if seeing a stranger. His mouth opened and closed, but no words came out. Nkiru, who hadn't spoken in months, suddenly found her voice. "You kill my baby," she whispered. Then louder. "You killed my baby? For what? Because your husband loved her? Because she was happy? You killed my innocent child." She launched herself at Adanna with a scream of rage, but the elders held her back. Nkiru collapsed to the ground, wailing with a grief that had found new depths. Her daughter hadn't died from a random illness. She had been murdered. Murdered by someone she had trusted, someone she had called sister. The village elders looked at Adanna with disgust and horror. "This is an abomination," the oldest one said. "You have brought blood guilt upon this entire compound. You have violated the most sacred law, the protection of children." That night, Emeka died. He died calling for his mother, the same mother whose jealousy had sealed his fate. Adanna held him as he took his last breath, and in that moment, she died too. Not physically, but in every way that mattered. She had sacrificed everything: her husband's love, her home, her respect, and all 3 of her sons for revenge. And the revenge had destroyed her completely. The village elders gathered the next morning to pass judgment. In the old days, Adanna would have been executed for such a crime. But Chief Okonkwo, broken by grief and betrayal, simply said, "Let her go. Let her live with what she has done. Death would be a mercy she doesn't deserve." So Adanna was banished from the compound. She was stripped of everything: her jewelry, her clothes, her possessions. She left wearing only a plain wrapper, carrying nothing else. As she walked through the village toward the main road, people came out of their homes to watch. Nobody spoke to her. Nobody helped her. They just stared at the woman who had killed a child out of jealousy and lost everything as a result. She wandered from village to village, but her story traveled faster than she did. Wherever she went, people knew who she was, the jealous wife who had poisoned her husband's child and lost her own children as punishment. Nobody would shelter her. Nobody would feed her. Nobody would even look at her without disgust. Adanna eventually disappeared into obscurity, living like a vagrant, surviving on scraps and charity from people who didn't know her story. She became a living warning tale, the story mothers told their daughters about the dangers of jealousy and envy. As for Chief Okonkwo, he never recovered from the loss of all 4 children. He aged rapidly, his wealth meaning nothing without family to share it with. He would sit in his large, empty compound, surrounded by all his possessions, completely alone. 2 years after Emeka's death, he was found dead in his sleep. They said he died of a broken heart. Nkiru remained by Chidera's grave long after everyone else had moved on. She would talk to the earth as if her daughter could hear her, telling her stories, singing her songs, asking for forgiveness for not protecting her. One morning, she simply wasn't there anymore. Some villagers said they saw her walking toward the forest, toward the river. Her body was never found. People believe she went to join her daughter in the spirit world. The compound that was once filled with life, laughter, and prosperity stood empty for years. Eventually, it fell into ruin, becoming a haunted place that children were warned not to go near. They said you could hear crying from that compound at night, the ghost of Chidera calling for her mother, the spirits of Chike, Obinna, and Emeka wandering in confusion, and Adanna's own tormented spirit, forever trapped in the place where her jealousy destroyed everything. This story shakes me every time I tell it, because it's a perfect picture of how jealousy doesn't just hurt others, it destroys the person who harbors it. Adanna didn't start out as a monster. She was a woman who had legitimate reasons to feel hurt, overlooked, and disrespected. Her pain was real. Her feelings were valid. But what she did with those feelings turned her into something unrecognizable. That's the thing about jealousy. It's a poison you drink yourself hoping it will kill someone else. Adanna thought she was eliminating her competition, reclaiming her position, restoring balance. But all she did was unleash a curse that took everything she loved. The native doctor warned her. He told her exactly what would happen. But jealousy had made her deaf to wisdom, blind to consequences, and willing to do the unthinkable. She couldn't see past her own pain to recognize that she was destroying herself. And here's what we need to understand. Adanna's real enemy was never Chidera. It wasn't even Nkiru. Her real enemy was the envy she fed every single day. Every time she compared herself to Nkiru, every time she counted what Nkiru had that she didn't, every time she replayed her humiliations in her mind, she was watering that seed of jealousy until it grew into a monster that consumed her completely. The lesson here is profound. Never let comparisons steal your peace. Never let someone else's success become your torment. And never, ever let jealousy convince you that destroying others will somehow heal you. Adanna's husband was wrong. He was very wrong in how he treated her, how he publicly humiliated her, how he neglected his sons for his daughter. But his wrong didn't justify her wrong. 2 wrongs didn't make her right. They just made 4 children dead and a family destroyed. Some battles are not yours to fight. Some offenses are better left to God to handle. Because when you take revenge into your own hands, especially revenge driven by jealousy, you don't just hurt your enemy. You destroy yourself and everyone connected to you. If you're holding on to jealousy right now, if you're bitter about someone else's success, if you're consumed with envy over what others have, let it go. That poison will kill you long before it touches them. Choose peace over payback. Choose contentment over comparison. Choose life over revenge. If this story spoke to you, do me a favor, hit that like button, share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to this channel for more stories that teach real-life lessons. Drop a comment below and tell me, what lesson did you take from Adanna's tragedy? Until next time, remember, guard your heart above all else, for everything you do flows from it. Don't let jealousy plant seeds in your heart that will grow into your destruction.